What to do when nobody can answer your Mercedes question. I run into this dilemma a lot, and so I wanted to share it with you guys because it seems like no matter how many people I help, there are very few people that have ever had good answers for me. Now, there are a couple people I have to give credit to. One of them is my friend Jim, who helps me with machine work. He is always there with a logical, rational answer for stuff pertaining to the mechanics of a Mercedes engine. So, you know, Jim was such a big help that Elaine and I invited him to our wedding because he has never had bad advice from me. But I want to give you some pointers about what to do if you're dealing with the situation and nobody can answer it for you. Nobody can answer the question for you. So, first of all, I would begin by saying it's okay to browse some forums and see if anybody has had the same problem you have. I would probably stick to Mercedes forums or forums that were heavy on Mercedes content. Same with Facebook groups. I would avoid generic answers. There's always that guy on the forum that says, have you changed the plug wires, the spark plugs, and the distributor cap and rotor, or if it's a diesel, have you changed your fuel filters? Have you put clean filters in it? And glow plugs? Yeah, we're not talking about those answers. We're talking about a word-for-word match. I know when I was dealing with an issue with the with the transmission governor on a 1971 280SL, I checked the 113 forum pretty thoroughly and came across a post by a guy who seemed to understand my problem. So instead of taking the information right off of the forum, I emailed him and asked him for some clarification, which he was happy to do. His comments led to the solution to my problem, so don't be afraid to Google the question. I get so frustrated because people will Google ask me simple questions before they actually investigate them for yourself. And the one thing I want people to take away from this channel is learn how to ask your own and answer your own questions. You know? Okay, so second, let's say the forum does not pan out. I usually end up looking at some other areas. So let's say I think I'm having a fuel problem. At that point, I have to engage in a mental battle with myself and ask myself, am I really having a fuel problem, or do I need to rethink my diagnosis? So let's look at a problem here that could be a fuel problem or an ignition problem. I have a 250C 1972 that stumbles like hell. And it sits there and it misses at idle. And this miss is subtle and it doesn't appear consistent. So I think it's a carburetor issue. Even though my carburetors seem to work well and in fact are freshly rebuilt and I have good fuel delivery, I still keep adjusting carburetors and idle speed trying to get it to go away. Well, one of the things that I'm not remembering here is that intake manifold vacuum could be playing a part in this, because if the engine draws too lean a fuel mixture because of weak vacuum, then guess what you're going to get? You're going to get stumbling and missing sometimes. So what controls manifold vacuum? Well, of course, the manifold, but also ignition timing. Yes, you can advance ignition timing slightly to increase manifold vacuum, and that is acceptable. I have done it before on a number of 280SE 4.5s and also cars with Zenith carburation. But there's an example of where I needed to sit back and reassess the cause of my problem without any bias, without misinformation bias. Now, a fourth thing that I tend to run into when I'm looking for the answer to a problem that nobody can help me with is I start reaching out to people that I've never spoken to before but might be experts. Now, sometimes you're going to come up with a dud and sometimes you're not. A good example when I came up with a dud was when I was trying to time the injection pump on my friend's 6.3 that had sat for many years. I ended up reaching out to a shop called Northridge Imports in Los Angeles, which gave me completely false information about where the 60 and 64 degree marks were on the M100 harmonic balancer. However, I learned from this piece of information that I was given that the 90-degree mark is indeed a 90-degree mark, and then I was able to count backwards. So reaching out to this third party did actually give me 1 point of reference, which is the 90-degree mark, and then I was able to use a degree wheel to verify that it indeed the 64-degree mark, which is about where you're supposed to time the injection pump on a 6.3-liter engine, was the true indicator of where the pump timing begins, or ends, actually, end of delivery on that car. Okay, number 5, here's another good one. So actually what I want you to take away from 4 is if you get enough bad information, sometimes you can figure out the truth from the bad information, because the bad information allows you to sift out any flaws in your own logic. So, and logic is very important here. Now, a good number 5 takeaway is that you should not limit yourself to knowledge that is on the internet or knowledge from other people. Sometimes you need to spend money to increase your knowledge base, which is why I have so many books. I know I sound like Ty Lopez, but the truth is that if you don't have the literature that's relevant to the car you're working on, you're going to end up guessing about 50 to 70% of the time, and only about half of those guesses will be right. I have dug through obscure factory literature for hours trying to figure out the solutions to problems. Here's a good example. I was changing the transmission years ago on a 560 SEC, and I unbolted the flex plate off the back of the flywheel and put it on in the wrong position. This flex plate has a magnetic receiver on it that corresponds with the crankshaft position sensor, allowing the engine to fire at the right intervals. Why did the engine run so rough and so poorly when I was done? Well, it was because I put the flex plate on in the wrong orientation. Now, if it had not been for my sister who came across a cleverly researched factory diagram showing the alignment of the flywheel and alignment of the flex plate together, I would have never solved this issue. Mercedes drilled a hole in the flex plate and a hole in the flywheel. Now, this is something that you're not going to find in a forum. Why? Because I've looked. At least 5 years ago I looked. Back then you wouldn't have. Maybe now you would. But the point is that the knowledge usually exists in a book, and it usually exists somewhere in Mercedes literature. The problem is that we don't go looking hard enough for the knowledge, and that's an unfortunate thing about us, that we are unwilling to spend $50 or $100. We'd rather take it to a mechanic to spend $100 or $200. I think the 6th point that I have for you guys is don't give up. People end up spending money, losing time, and not learning anything when they give up. And when you give up, the biggest thing you're robbing yourself of is knowledge. Better knowledge and better diagnostic ability. People who give up do not advance in the Dow of learning how to repair Mercedes. So I'm going to repeat that for those of you who are not paying attention. Those who give up do not advance. If you give up when you get to the hardest part, it means that everything that you learned up to that point is not useful, because you did not figure out how to tie all the components in together, all the parts, into making a whole. This is why I am so critical of people who take Mercedes apart for parts instead of actually restoring them, because you're not learning anything. This is how you get Alzheimer's disease. This is how children don't learn how to read the right way, because they give up when they get to the hard book. This is why people fail math classes, because they give up when they get to the hard equations and start Christmas treeing the test. I have been told by so many of my mentors growing up that when you give up, when you get to the hardest part of anything, you will ultimately fold under any form of stress or pressure that tests your abilities beyond what you, the learner, have developed them to. So, you know, I think that most of the people are running around with these cars that are sort of like half working, hopefully will listen to this and say, man, I really need to listen to what Pierre says, because all this is knowledge that I had to learn. I have a slightly above average IQ. I'm no genius. I'm just extremely stubborn, and I have made a contract with myself where when things get extremely difficult, I am not going to give up till I find the problem. And yes, it can be embarrassing and hurtful and painful, especially when you're dealing with the customer. People may lose respect for you because it takes you so long. But at the end of the day, it is about going to bed at night saying, I did not give up. Anyway, if you enjoyed this video, please like, share, and subscribe. Please tap the bell for notifications. Excuse me for 1 second, okay? Please tap the bell for notifications. Please leave us an applause, and please give us a chance to respond to any comments that involve questions about your Mercedes. Sometimes it might take us a while. And all of our Patreon supporters.